Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Deal Landman Show. We are so excited to have a new guest with us today that we'll introduce in a few minutes. But we are also really excited to welcome Drew back with us after his what did you go? Did you spend time in county? Was it the Pen? Where was it?
So we have been traveling a ton for work recently and to blow off some steam out in Vegas for a conference last weekend, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. There was the World Oil Man Poker Tournament, and getting involved with that and being able to see those hands going and having pocket kings and everything. Like, I mean, you feel like you're going to win this whole thing, and I mean, with all the money, the prestige, everything that goes along with that, you get a little carried away. People might have seen the video online on LinkedIn. I'm not proud, Jairus. I mean, it is one of my most viewed videos. So I do want to preface that although I got reprimanded by the Real Deal Landman Show, by Lonnie and the rest of the legal team here, I will say the numbers tracked. And yeah, it was absolutely great for getting the message out there. So a lot of fun in Vegas. Happy to be back. Happy to be back in the seat here. Like that's all that really matters. And I wanted to show you my professionalism, so I tried to embody my best Jairus Johnson today, and I even went a little bit further with the tie. But I feel like with the kind of salt and pepper facial hair and the white shirts and everything, I feel like we got a real professional episode going today. Like this is outside the norm for us.
Apparently, we have adopted a uniform. I will wear a white shirt on Sundays to go to church. I like to dress up for church. Other than that, I almost never wear a white shirt, and I did today. And I knew as I was putting it on, I knew that Drew would take this moment to try and redeem himself and copy me. So yeah, you referred to the LinkedIn post. Hopefully people go and check that out because they can see the video in action of you, let's say, overreacting just a little bit.
Hardly reacting. I mean, and that's the thing, taken completely out of context.
We did find it necessary on behalf of the show to issue a press release. But I just wanted to ask, do you want to add a verbal apology at this time?
Oh, this is 2025. Verbal apologies are a far thing of the past, right? What I will say is a lot of people have commented and they said, that doesn't look like you. That person on the video has extremely long, glorious hair. And to that, I say, people are doctoring videos like crazy these days. And so I'm just going to go on record here and say, it's probably all deep fake. It might not have been me. But you know what? A post is a post. It's out there now. Can't take it back down. If there's a way to delete a LinkedIn post, I don't know it. I don't want it. That's the direction I'm going with this today. Sorry.
You don't boast to be any kind of technology expert, do you? If you don't know how to take down a social media post.
How even would I go about deleting a post? No, for somebody that is a VP of business development and marketing, I just want you to know, I do know how to delete stuff. The one thing that I will say that has always been a positive for me, and I'm giving this away for free today. This is big stuff. Put in a little bit of humor, put in a little bit of just nonsensicalness. Like I would say percentage wise, do that 5% of the time, do that 10% of the time. And it gets the exposure. It gets people at least interested in you, what product you're going with. And so it's fun stuff like that where whenever, like just as dumb as it is, whenever I was looking at, like, found that video online and I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's just throw it out there. And it turned into one of the biggest things that I had put out there, which is really fun, but it also is a little bit disheartening because Jairus, yourself, you know how much time sometimes you put into, I'm going to make this out there. This is going to make a difference. Like people are going to see this and they're going to be really excited about it. And then you're like, now everybody just wants to see somebody get hit with a chair or, trip down a flight of stairs or something like that. But it is, you got to keep things fun. You got to keep it enjoyable. And that's what keeps the wheels moving forward. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of LinkedIn content, our guest that we have today is absolutely crushing it on the content that he has. And I do want to get to that in a little bit. But first, I think a proper introduction would be in order. So we're glad to welcome Sam with us. Okay, I'm going to get
Siebenaler.
Siebenaler, right?
Siebenaler?
Sieb-
Siebenaler?
Siebenaler.
Oh.
Siebenaler, not okay.
Yeah. Like
Siebenaler.
Sieben run, Sieben scream, Sieben holler. Like Siebenhaler.
Ooh, that's a catchy. What do they call the pneumatic? No,
I mean,
pneumatic is air. The mnemonic. Thank you. The mnemonic.
I mean,
Sieben.
I've been living with this last name for quite a while, so I've had to come up with ways to explain it to people.
Yeah. That's good.
Most of the time, if we have any last name or any first name for that matter that we can't do, Jairus 5 minutes before the show just changes their names and asks them to update their LinkedIn. You didn't get that treatment, so I mean, we thought we could handle it.
I mean, it's not too late. I mean, I can
It is.
Horatio Ortiz, everybody.
So, I assume Sam is short for Samuel? Does anybody call you Samuel in your life?
People, it's interestingly, I sign all my documents Samuel, and so it's a kind of an easy filter to know who actually knows me well enough, like that everybody calls me Sam in real life. I sign everything Samuel, so when people walk up to me and call me Samuel, then I can tell that they probably don't know me all that closely.
Yeah, let me give kind of a quick background in what brought Sam with us on here today. So, Sam first reached out to me last year and found that I was living in Colorado Springs. And he's like, "Hey, I live in Colorado Springs. I think we should meet." And when I saw his contact, I think maybe email signature or something at the time, but his title was an economic geologist. And I thought, what in the world would an economic geologist want to do with me? I'm thrilled that there's somebody else in Colorado Springs that I can talk to that wants to talk to me, but I have no idea what an economic geologist is. So, Sam, tell us, what is an economic geologist and why would that prompt you to reach out and talk to a landman?
Yeah. Okay. Well, within the realm of geology, you eventually end up sort of splitting and separating into different subfields. So there are structural geologists that will deal with the physics of how things are being folded or deformed or breaking or faulting. There's sedimentary geologists that are looking at how things are eroding. There's igneous geologists, and there's a subset. There's oil and gas geology, but there's also economic geology, which tends to be oil and gas sort of falls into that, but typically that is sort of code for saying mine geologist. Where's the differentiation between a geology project that's just sort of academic and one that actually makes money? And that's the economic geology realm. And so economic geology is just sort of a tag or a way of coding and saying that I do geology that's business functional, not just academically looking at how rocks are behaving.
You mentioned mines. So are we talking like hard rock mines or what kind of mines are we talking about?
That's certainly most of my experiences in hard rock mining. Yeah, in gold, a little bit of copper, some other commodities as well, and less on the oil and gas side. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you grow up did you grow up doing this, or like what was kind of your first experience of getting into the mining?
No, I dumb luck. I got into this all by dumb luck. It was far less planned than growing up with it. I got out of the military. I had an opportunity to work for NATO over in Europe, but the position I was offered required a 4-year degree. And in my head, I sort of believed that had I taken that position, in my 20s, I was going to be forever capped at that pay grade because I was already getting the opt out to let me take that role in the first place without a college degree. So in my head, this became a situation where, well, I can get a degree in anything. I just need a degree in something. Let's do something that's kind of interesting. And I picked geology. That's how I ended up getting into geology. Throughout the course of my academic studies, my field area was in the backyard of Newmont. And so right about the time I was graduating, there was a chief geologist at the Twin Creeks mine that had reached out and asked me to come interview for a job. And that's how I ended up in mining.
Fantastic. And have you always been in Colorado?
No, I'm originally from Minnesota. And then right about the age of 18, I started wandering for a while and lived a bunch of places. before ending up in Nevada for grad school. And then coming out of grad school, I took that job at Twin Creeks, which is in Winnemucca, Nevada. Was in Nevada for about 10 years before moving to Colorado.
Yeah, that's a really good like swath around. Starting off in Minnesota, Nevada, and then you were military as well, right?
Yep.
How many?
I was in the Army for 4 years from 99 to '03. Yeah, and I was doing information security, right? Like IT, so completely different set of skills than what I do now.
Something else. And your school, was it Colorado School of Mines or was it?
My undergrad was at Winona State, which is a small state school in Minnesota, and then I got my master's degree at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Is
Yep.
is that in Winona?
It's in Winona, yeah, in the southeast
Shut
corner.
up! I didn't. Okay,
Yeah.
so my wife's grandparents, until they passed, they lived in St. Charles.
Oh, okay.
And so I've been up to St. Charles several times. And then Winona's kind of like the big town that's not Rochester, next to St. Charles. So fun fact for like oil and gas mines, there's a large percentage of our frac sand that gets used in nationwide operations that comes out of that same area.
Okay.
Yep. Out of gosh, there's a chance I'm wrong here, so you might get the comment sections blowing up here, but I think that's the Jordan sandstone, if I remember correctly. That those.
I'll have to take your word for it.
I'll just go along with that.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful area. One of my favorite memories I have is Labor Day weekend. St. Charles has their Gladiola Days festival. And it was right after my son was born. It was a beautiful Sunday morning, and we were watching this parade, and he was, my baby son was sitting on my lap, and the weather was just gorgeous, and it was fantastic. I have lots of great memories from that St. Charles, Winona area. That's cool that you went to school there.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Plainview, so right next to St. Charles.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I didn't realize that. Okay. Very cool. So Colorado, I know there's a lot of mines that I see in Colorado, particularly Colorado Springs. My wife and I like to take a drive, and we like to go out to Victor and Cripple Creek, and there is a massive mine that is out there. Is that something that you've worked with?
Yeah, I worked at Cripple Creek and Victor for almost 4 years. Yeah, I was helping with the technical services group up there in the mine geology department, helping manage that, which is kind of what got me into royalties, actually.
Okay. So now we're getting somewhere. So far, I haven't really seen like the economic geologist landman connection.
Yeah.
So take us to so you said the word royalties, and right away, like our listeners' ears are going to perk up and go, "Oh, royalties! I do something with royalties." Yeah. Okay. So how does that connect to your job?
Well, at the time, overseeing the mine geology department, on the list of tasks and responsibilities that group has, within mines, it's a very interesting role. Interesting in the sense that you can get into it as an entry level job, and yet you're the end all be all for how a mine chooses to make money, because you're the one that's choosing what rock is ore and what rock is waste. So you're picking out the chunks of the mine that are going to go to the mill, the chunks of the mines that are going to get processed other ways, or stockpiled, or thrown away. And depending on the grade of some of those mining blocks, you can be making multi-million-dollar decisions over the course of 30 minutes. A high grade block could have 5,000, 10,000 ounces with gold in it. And you can be deciding whether or not that gets to the mill the way it's supposed to get to the mill, or if it gets thrown away and we don't recover any money whatsoever. So you get to pick what goes where. And in that, you get to decide how and when the mine makes money.
How many years have you been a part of this now?
I worked for Newmont for about 10 years. I've been in the mining industry for just shy of 20 years.
Amazing.
But to your question, in being that department that's making those decisions, you're also the one that becomes the accountant for deciding at the end of month in 30 days, how many tons of ore did we move? What was the grade of that ore? Where did it go? Did it get processed? That then immediately dovetails into royalties in terms of whose royalties, like who gets paid what? Like how many of your tons and ounces did we move? How many ounces do we think that we recovered this month? And based on how many ounces we think we recovered, then that turns into how do you get paid? And of course, that gets into your royalty contract. As part of ore control, I also had done Cripple Creek and Victor has over 30 royalty holders on that mine. So knowing all of the contracts and how we're paying for each contract and figuring out, okay, whose stuff did we process? Did we not process? How did we process it? How well did we process it? What's our estimate for how things recovered? All of those kinds of things.
So my question, Sam, is like Jairus and I from the oil and gas world, like we're very familiar with the contracts and the leases and everything that go on with that. Like, is it a very similar situation, like where you said there's 40 different royalty owners? Are we talking about we're looking at the land, the surface, and the mineral? Like, are they signing leases? Are they signing for everything from the surface to the center of the earth that's coming out of there? What's a typical contract look like?
Well, and I'm going to also chime in. So this has been kind of new for me to learn on this. I assumed that it wasn't all federal land, but especially like on, a lot of articles or things that you read seeing about mining, it's typically happening on federal land. But talking about this number of people, like I'm guessing there's a lot of private owners who have mining on their land as well.
Yeah. And typically the private lands are the more sought after. So there is a little bit of a chicken and egg thing in terms of it's often happening on federal lands or private patented lands. If you were to go all the way back to the beginning of when that mine was discovered, you're going back to a discovery group or an exploration group. That group is going to want to operate on patented privated lands because the permitting for your exploration permits is so much easier. And your opportunity to actually get a mining permit is considered or at least perceived to be so much better on the private lands because you're not having to permit through the BLM or the Forest Service on top of coming out with an agreement with like the state. So yeah, it's happening on state lands. It's happening on patented private lands. Often those private lands go back to historic mining from, the 1800s. It's land and title that's been passed down over time. The mineral rights have stayed with the land and it hasn't necessarily been severed. But we do deal with severed mineral rights as well. Surface and mineral.
And so to go back to Drew's question, these agreements, like, would you say these agreements are comparable to an oil and gas lease? Are they structured the same way? Are they longer, shorter? How can you enlighten us on what that looks like? Or what are they called, for example?
Yeah, so I was thinking about, I'm toying around with how to do a LinkedIn post about this, but in mining, there's a mechanism for payment called an NSR, a net smelter return. That's a little bit different than I think what you're accustomed to dealing with in oil and gas. And that is a payment on all of the metal once it leaves the gate. So the operator can deduct transportation costs or smelting costs. They don't, plus or minus maybe some marketing costs. They typically aren't going to be deducting things like mining costs in an NSR. NSRs are so common that in mining, I suspect there's a decent number of people that consider NSR to mean royalty, as though that is the only actual kind of royalty. In oil and gas, you're more often looking at unitization kinds of royalties as opposed to like an actual payment on a profit or a produced kind of royalty, right? So, I mean, I think some of the payment mechanisms get to be a little bit different. There's some fundamental differences when you're dealing with something that is solid versus liquid. And there also ends up being a little bit of a difference in the sense that in mining, a lot of these lease deals might get made 10 or 15 or 20 years before you go into production. So you're making a lease agreement, and who knows what kind of mine. Is it going to be a surface mine or an underground mine? Is there going to be a mill, or is it just going to be a leach pad? So you don't necessarily even know how the processing is going to work before you make these lease agreements. Mining, it seems like you're operating from a place of less knowledge sometimes when you're inking these deals. All of which is to say, there seems to be a lot less of a consistent, typical mining royalty contract. They all kind of end up being a little bit of like the unicorn one of one that may look similar to many others, but ultimately is also very different than any other.
Do they have stipulations and like provisions inside those contracts of if this company stops operations for X amount of time, then they lose rights to being able to continue to mine there, kind of like a secondary term in like a oil and gas lease? Is the mine obligated to continue operations?
Typically, mines are looking to build agreements that don't allow the royalty holder to have much say in their day-to-day operations at all. And the answer to your question really kind of comes down to leverage. I would say that is probably more atypical. It really kind of comes down to the lease agreement, and it depends on the terms of how long you've written the lease agreement for. But so long as you're under lease, the mine has the capacity to kind of operate their mine however they want to.
Are they obligated to do monthly payments to the owners?
Depends on how you want to write it. The ones that I was dealing with typically were monthly payments.
When is it determined that this exploration or this production or this mining agreement, when does it reach the end of its life? Like, when does that agreement expire? What triggers that?
It just depends on how it's negotiated. So I'm aware of one that we're looked at where now that the mine is running to the end of its life, it begins the process of handing it back to the actual landholder. And in that case, it's a little bit tricky because all of the infrastructure they got built on the property, right? So the mill goes back to the landholder since the mill is now on that landholder's property.
So it's kind of like the surface owner, in the oil and gas lease, it'll typically say that the lessee or assigns has the ability to go and gather their equipment off the land after the end of the lease. Like they'll have up to 6 months or something to do that. So it sounds kind of similar to that, to where once that mining agreement expires, then those landowners potentially could own whatever equipment or stuff that's on it.
Yeah, and in mining, what I would say is in the last 15 years, the contracts have gotten much more sophisticated and they've begun to catch up more to the oil and gas leases that are better trying to think through kind of problems. And when you start looking at like the agreements that were written in like 1890 and haven't been renegotiated since, they can be like 5 pages and don't deal with any of that stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that Jairus and I talk about a lot, and one of the things that we speak about at conventions too, is how technology is kind of ushering a new, I don't want to say renaissance into the oil and gas world, but the way that we're collecting data and the way that we are everything from revenue to the way that we're going through and looking at old contracts and using AI and leveraging. Do you see that similar in the mining world of have things kind of been going along the same route for quite a while? And now that we've really enhanced technology over the last few years, has that seen its way into the mining community?
Sort of, but slower, I would say. I would say slower. My impression, oil and gas seems to be more enthusiastic to embrace technology. It's certainly like within the mixing of oil and gas and crypto and some of those things have made technology a little bit more commonplace or acceptable. It's interesting on the outside. A lot of these mines sort of operate like walled fortresses. And the mine managers that are operating those mines aren't necessarily incentivized to try the next new big thing. You've been given this mine plan that's 12 months long. It's 100% optimized. And by optimized, I mean, they ran 1,000 scenarios and they looked at, you have 20 trucks and the trucks can operate this many hours a day with this kind of maintenance schedule. And this max speed. And we've figured it out down to how many loads per month each truck can move. And so if anything happened, like that truck gets a flat tire that wasn't in your plan that you wrote out 12 months ago, and now it's down for a day. And now because the rest of the year is already optimized, that lost production, there is no way to make that production up, right? You're now a month behind and there is no catch up because your other 11 months are already optimized too, right? Anything that involves a change is really just a chance to disrupt your plan in a way that you'll never be able to catch back up from. So you don't see hey, let's try AI and see what happens, right? Because that could be your year and then you have one bad year. And as the mine manager, that could be the difference between a bonus and people are looking at you like you might get promoted. And man, do I have to worry about layoffs, right? In terms of you took a mine and overachieved or met the budget plan, or you missed the budget plan. These mines are less enthusiastic about trying new things. I say all of that to say, like, on the exploration side, you do see some of that. Like Cobalt Metals sort of famously is an exploration company that's using AI to aggregate large amounts of exploration data and try to find drill targets. So we are starting to see it come through in places. It's just sort of a hodgepodge depending on what part of the business and in terms of how enthusiastic they are about technology.
From the little bit that I've looked in on you as CEO of Precision Mineral Accounting, is that right? And looking at your LinkedIn and looking at everything that you've got online, like it seems like you bring innovation and technology, and you've been a dynamic leader over your career. So whenever we just say what we did on how these mining companies and everything kind of slow moving and everything. So as CEO of Precision Mineral Accounting, what are you guys doing to be the tip of the spear and be looked at as kind of that innovative leader?
Yeah. Well, Precision Mineral Accounting is a company that I founded based off my experiences issuing royalty payments. It's based on sort of the recognition that to look at a royalty the way that I look at a royalty in terms of what operationally happened on the ground and how did that impact and translate into what I believe I owe you as a payment. Um, it would take probably 10 years on a mine site and it's sort of understanding the operational component to really dig in and know how those reported numbers are being calculated, right? There's many examples of me talking to people that were receiving royalties or being audited by a big firm and having their professional come in and audit me where I felt like I was more teaching them than them asking me and checking to make sure I was doing it right. And so precision mineral accounting was something that the genesis of that idea was, man, a royalty holder really needs a me, somebody that has the geology, the technical, the engineering, the metallurgical background to dig into the reported production to make sure that it's correct. And without that background, the analogy that I tend to use or that I've come up with recently is it's a little bit like asking a hockey referee to, oversee a cricket game. Like they've got the whistle, they've got the authority, they understand a rule set, but they don't necessarily know what they're looking at. And it's going to take a lot of, you have to learn cricket to accurately call a foul in cricket, even though you might know hockey really well. That's what the innovation we're looking to bring to the industry is the capacity to level that playing field on the experience and knowledge side so that if you're getting a check, you can really feel confident and comfortable that that check is the right amount. And in many royalty holders cases, it really comes down to they just sort of have to take the producer's word for it, and we're hoping to help with that.
Man, we see that same thing in the oil and gas industry. I mean, Jairus and I have seen that forever. We talk to royalty owners all the time, and they are at the not the mercy, but they are taking what these companies give them as that is what I'm supposed to get. And there's a lot of good, groups out there. I think NARO and some of the other ones they help educate those royalty owners. But that's a very good calling to be in and to be able to help out with these companies. So that's fantastic.
And I've noticed and recognized that in oil and gas, there are companies that specialize in royalty management for royalty holders. They're quite common. Same in music or in other creatives. And on the mining side, there are some individuals that will help from here and there, but there isn't really a dedicated firm that is specializing in this specific, very niche sort of skill set. There's obviously the big firms that's under the umbrella of 100 services that they offer. We're looking to be very, very specific and specialized in mining royalty management.
So are you pioneering something that for the most part just hasn't been done before?
As best we can tell, yeah. I mean, I'm always sort of hesitant to say that someplace, somebody didn't try something like this once before, and maybe I'm just not aware, but hopefully so, yeah.
That's incredible. So, you brought up like there are firms and individuals who are mineral managers. They even pursue the certified mineral management certification from NARO. These are largely dealing with oil and gas royalty owners. And when they are working, when they do an audit or when they do some type of service to try and capture additional revenues, usually it's to the tune of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. I mean, if what would you say is your prize? Like, what's the eye on the prize for people that you could be representing? Is that a number you can share, or like what you say?
I would suspect it's to the tune of millions or tens of millions. In all seriousness, you can look at there's recently a dispute, the Masabi Trust and Cleveland Cliffs up in Minnesota, and that went to arbitration, and it was right around to the tune of $60 million, and that was for an underpayment that was happening. I want to say 2020, 2021, and just part of 2022. So in 2.5 years, they had racked up 60 million in underpayments that they got rectified in an arbitration hearing.
Okay, so you probably got some attention there there on that number. You're pioneering something that's new. How are people finding out that you exist? Like, what do you do to go out and tell the world? Private royalty owners that have mines on their property that there is somebody who is potentially an advocate on their behalf? What do you do to get that message out?
We've only been around since January, so we are brand new. And so social media, getting the social media accounts and beginning to talk about that on social media, on conferences. Me and I have two partners in the company. We both have been in. I've been in mining for 20 years, and I think I might have the least experience between the three of us. So we have a pretty big networks. We've all been doing it for quite a while, and so just starting to talk to the people that we know and talk to the people that are providing services to these private royalty holders. As I've explained the business to people, that's sort of a really quick one that people will focus on is how do you find these people? And to some extent, I think the answer is it's kind of hard. From the business owner perspective, I think hard is okay because that means it's going to be hard on my competition too. So if we can figure it out, it becomes the moat that prevents anybody else from just picking it up and doing it as well. So one of my philosophies in business is I don't mind as it's hard as long as it's hard for everybody, because then that means when I figure it out, it's just hard on my competition.
Right. Wise words.
So when you're going to go to a company, and if we need to edit this out later, that's fine. I'm just curious, sure. Like when you have to when you go to a company later, like how are you going to get their attention to say, hey, I'm working on behalf of, or I'm trying to advocate on behalf of, and we think there's a claim here. What does it take to get their attention to where they're actually going to work with you and try and, provide, like, do they have to provide data like production, payment history? I mean, what does that process look like?
Yeah, the answer is it kind of all comes down to the contract. So obviously in most contracts, you're hoping to have a right to audit clause. And part of what I'm hoping this company can also do is help people write better audit rights. Start getting very specific about the data that you get and how fast you get it. That's one thing to say that I'm entitled to reconciliation reports, but does that mean they can wait 5 years to get it to me? So being much more specific in your contracting in terms of what data you're going to need and how fast you're going to get it. But also, we can also look at things like for the publicly traded companies, they're required to publicly disclose their production. We can look at things like that. And in many cases, the mines aren't looking to get into an adversarial relationship with their royalty holders. To some extent, maybe the contract doesn't say you're entitled to data, and it doesn't say that you're not entitled to data. And we can talk about what data are you comfortable with sharing, especially if it's a case of data that you're already generating anyway. Can we just see that data if we're not asking you to do extra work that you wouldn't already be doing? I do find that tends to be where a lot of the pushback comes when you're asking for data. It becomes, well, how much more work are you making for me?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you were familiar with the Paramount Plus show, Landman, but do you think that they will eventually be able to make a Paramount Plus version of the job that you're doing?
I hope not, because I don't want to see who they cast me as. Yeah, I'd be worried about that. I mean, I've heard that they may look at doing something that deals more with the mining industry to some extent. I don't know that it's going to be about the royalty component of it or the land piece of it. I'm trying to think of what would be like the most dramatic, like the greenfield exploration geos running around trying to make that discovery. I don't know.
So when people ask you today what you do you say, oh, I'm CEO of this company? Do you say, oh, I'm founder of a startup? Do you still say, oh, I'm an economic geologist? Or do you say, like, I'm an advocate for mining royalty owners? Like, what's your quick answer when somebody says, so what do you do?
I think depending on who I think I'm talking to, it could be any of those things. I would probably say I'm the CEO of a company that advocates for royalty holders. I sometimes would say, yeah, I'm a geologist in the mining industry. It would kind of depend on the audience and where I think they're asking me is coming from. Because it's one of those things where it's like, depending on how you want to look at me, I'd have worn a lot of hats, right? Like I'm a veteran, I'm a CEO, once a geologist, always a geologist. I don't know that the other geos are willing to claim me since I do so much executive work now. I think my standard answer to that was generally, yeah, I'm a CEO that advocates for fairness and transparency in mining royalties.
In Colorado Springs, so whenever you're not running around working with the mines, talking to the royalty owners, what are some of the things that you and the family like to do?
Oh, man. What I'm finding in the last 5 months is when you're starting a company up and you're getting it off the ground, it's that classic, you kind of work for a jerk. Like if it's, my family time has become very much like scheduled, and obviously I know when I'm falling into a family situation and I try to be present there, but if there's just sort of like, I don't know what we're doing right now, then my brain immediately goes to like strategy and marketing and and who do we need to be in contact with. But I would say camping is a big one for us. We like to get outdoors. We like to go hiking. And, it's the typical Colorado stuff. And then being from Minnesota, anytime I can get out on the water, right? Like a kayak or a fishing boat, any of those things.
That's fantastic. Jairus, you ever do fishing? You ever do kayaking up there?
I don't do kayaking. I do something that I call fishing, which is I get near water or in water and I throw a line in there and hope that something happens. And honestly, that is satisfactory for me enough. I've tried to go into a fly shop and they start spewing out a bunch of terminology that I have no idea. And so, they have those little plastic cup things. I'm like, put some things in this and then tell me where to go use them. And that's kind of the extent of my fly fishing. But every now and then I catch something. Saturday, I was at a lake and had a few minutes and I was throwing a lure in and caught a little trout. And, that's fun to do. But I'm more of the jeeping type. So we like to see how high we can get without tearing something up and taking in the scenery.
That is fantastic. Well, yeah, it takes a lot to be able to balance the work life. We've had a lot of people on where we've talked about different leadership techniques and just building out a business. Like Sam, I think you're on a good path. How many people do you currently have now?
5 now.
And it sounds like it keeps you guys busy completely and growing a catalog of different clients.
I mean, entrepreneurially, when we got into it, we were expecting this to be a 12 to 18 month kind of. I was prepared to have a long runway to first client because you're dealing with people's money and you kind of have to build a reputation of trust before somebody's just gonna. I just was under the assumption very few people are going to be willing to be like, yeah, come this generational paycheck that we get every month that kind of provides for my family. Why don't you start tinkering with it? Even though I've never heard of you and your company's been around for a month. That didn't seem like that was going to be very likely to happen. So we've actually had great success and the message has gone over really, really well. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback. We inked our first client much sooner than I actually ever anticipated we'd be able to. We've got some really good leads going. There's a growth plan in mind. It's all being kind of done deliberately. The goal would be to get to kind of 15 or 20 people, and that's going to depend on what clients we bring on and when we bring them on. But between governments, First Nations in Canada, which it's the way First Nations operate in Canada is obviously very different than here in the US, as you may or may not be aware, in terms of the leverage and the clout and their constitutionally endowed rights to have a seat at the table for how minerals are being used. And then the family practices and private holders. It's been building out the relationships in all three of those kind of pillars. It's been really interesting to just know royalties, but I hadn't really thought about marketing or ideal client profiles or those kinds of things.
So you mentioned Canada. Is this a service that you could potentially deploy internationally? You could go global?
Yeah, and we intend to. Yeah. Certainly within Canada, Mexico, South and Central America. There's a lot going on in mining right now in the Middle East. I wouldn't say that we're actively marketing there, but we do have some connections there. So, and would be open to other countries as well. Australia is a huge mining country internationally for sure.
That's so cool. So I'm gonna put the two of you on the spot here. So Drew is a business development wizard, especially for new companies. He's done this a few times with brand new companies. Has been their business development guy and has helped build them up. Drew was also, for those who don't know, Drew was also the owner relations manager for an oil and gas company that historically likely had more royalty owners than any other company in the United States. So with this flashing, impressive background, Drew, one, what is advice that you would give Sam for his startup? And two, Sam, what questions would you have from Drew from his experiences on dealing with literally tens of thousands of different owners who have every question imaginable in every part of the United States?
That's pretty big, Jairus. That's pretty.
Yeah, you guys have fun. I'm gonna go take a break.
No, you go get a cup of coffee. Come back in a
Yeah.
few. The only thing that I could say, and it is nothing that Sam doesn't already know. I know, and it is be authentic and be just wear the truth on the sleeve the entire time of every one of the royalty owners that I ever talked to. They are looking for information. They're looking for someone to be able to take care of them with their best interest in mind. And I think, especially working for like a energy company, whenever the mindset of people throughout the nation, it ebbs and flows with the news, or ebbs and flows with like the money that they're receiving. You receive less money, you automatically think less of that company, and it's just like animalistic. That's just the way that people are wired, right? So being able to be that person that can deliver the truthful information, having the people on staff to be able to know what they're looking for, kind of like your analogy earlier of the person, as the referee of the cricket or whatever sport, they have all of that knowledge there, but they just don't understand the sport that they're working with. Um, Being able to accumulate people on your staff that do have that knowledge and do have that area of expertise, because the normal person doesn't have that. And to be able to go to a company that has that deep, rich knowledge set, that's where that's where the real trust lies. And I think it's fantastic of being able to see that this little niche part of the market is something that needs attention. And with the experience that you've got, it sounds like you're already building that out, especially if it's just fresh since January. You guys are doing fantastic already.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to think that I'm pretty good at being authentic. I suspect that might come out with some of my social media stuff. I'm awfully glad that my partner has put up with my sometimes dry and sarcastic sense of humor that will come out from time to time. The question that pops in my mind for you, Drew, is sort of like, and we've been touching on it. How did you go about finding these royalty holders? Was it the traditional landman approach of heading to the county courthouse? Was there something beyond that?
There was a lot of that. There's a lot of databases even online of being able to find where like there's been no way to get a hold of the person that's supposed to receive the royalty. And I would suspect in mining, since it is this generational thing, it sounds like with a lot smaller set of owners, I would imagine it would probably be a little easier. With oil and gas, sometimes those are split with, 30 different ways. And some people don't even realize that they were even supposed to be getting any sort of royalties. And so tracking them down through like Nexus Lexus and through county records and everything else, like you would almost put in more effort and time and money in finding the person than being able to deliver them the sliver of royalty that they were going to have, by the end of it. But they always were very appreciative whenever we were able to find them and to be able to give them that full breakdown of maybe a chain of title, of showing them how they were receiving this, what exactly that meant, what those contracts meant, and being that person that could explain something that they've never had to deal with before in their life. This is just one that I've never known much about, and I've really enjoyed kind of learning from you here, because I see there's so many little parallels that are so similar, and then there's so much that I know is completely different. But I mean, super super interesting.
Yeah, I think, and Jairus and I have had the conversation before of what's the same and what's different. It's probably easier to measure a barrel. At the end of the day, measuring an ounce isn't necessarily tough, but sometimes you're estimating it as opposed to being able to directly measure it. And we deal more with grades, I think, right? In terms of 100 ounces per ton versus, economics can take you all the way down to 0.008 ounces per ton. So you can be dealing with micro on the gold side, right? And obviously every commodity is different, but you can be dealing with very, very small amounts of metal for very, very large amounts of tons. I think of one barrel of oil having one value, whereas 1 ton of rock in gold can have a wide variety of values, right? And this goes back to your earlier question of, well, how come we're talking millions versus tens of thousands? There's so many opportunities to be off to the tune of 20% or more. You start getting into geostatistical theory in terms of we want to assign a grade to 100 million tons, and we took a 10-pound sample and we crushed that up, and we ultimately pulled 30 grams of material, and we tested that, and we got a grade for that 30 grams, and we then extract that out to 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 tons. How accurate is that, right? And when things start to get really nuggety, okay, the nuggety meaning this 30 grams was 100 ounces per ton. Does that mean all 10,000 tons are 100 ounces per ton? Something that's that extremely enriched? Probably not. Maybe you just happened to catch a sample that had that one little gold nugget in it, and that's the only gold nugget, right? Or maybe you sampled 6 inches to the side and you missed that gold nugget, and you think there's no gold there. So it can get very sophisticated sampling theory when you start extracting out to these models that are suggesting what the average grade of your material is going to be. And then, of course, you can run it through the mill, and at the end of it, you will pour a bar of something out. But then, if I assume that I sent you 1,000 ounces and we produced 500 ounces, does that mean my assumption was wrong? Or did we only recover 50% of what was in there? Were our models wrong? Was our recovery terrible? And so that assay, plus or minus 10%, our assumption of how many tons, plus or minus 10%, our recovery, plus or minus 10%. Next thing you know, you can be off by 20 or 30%, and 20 or 30% of 500,000 ounces produced per year can end up being a whole lot of money at $3,000 an ounce, right?
Absolutely. It honestly sounds like you have really developed a very sound process of being able to evaluate, and we absolutely wish you the best of luck with this company that you're working on. For the people that are listening or watching online, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Sam?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Sam Siebenaler, precisionmineralaccounting.com, our website. You can reach out to us there. Sam at precisionmineralaccounting.com. That's my email address. Any of those work. Yeah.
Give us a last word on what you expect to see from maybe the mining industry, or what's your outlook look like for the rest of 2025?
Ooh, for 2025. For the mining industry. Right now, everybody is really excited about critical minerals, and people are looking at locking up supply chain. And geopolitically, there's been a real reckoning about how China has locked up the processing capacity, the refining capacity. So you can discover any of these critical minerals that you need, but you still end up having to send them to China to get them turned into a usable product. So I think 2025 on the political side, there's just going to be a lot of looking at, are we bringing some of that capacity home? And especially as supply chains have gotten weaponized, and your ability to turn off, the kinds of metals and minerals that are needed for defense of a country. All of that said, there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement around exploration and processing for critical minerals. Let's see how that turns out, because I think there's still a lot of icky factor that the industry works against in terms of, we understand we need these mines, but I don't want one in my backyard. How that turns into permitting, all of that sort of up for grabs. Not to mention, even if you find them, how do the economics work? Is this something that's being subsidized on a federal level or a state level? Like, it's just a very interesting time in mining in terms of how we get our message out there and say, hey, we are every bit as important and necessary to a modern society as farming or as oil and gas. I think mining's trying to come up from behind the shadows and say, hey, we're important too. And we've been a little bit ignored. So this year is going to be really interesting on that front in terms of, are there pushes to open up exploration? Are there pushes to bring, some of that processing capacity back within the U.S. or friendly countries? Does this turn out to just be the flavor of the month fanfare that everybody says is really important, but nobody wants to pull out the checkbook and actually make some things happen? We'll see.
So last question. If Paramount Plus were to make a TV show, who would you want playing you?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have an answer. Probably not Billy Bob Thornton, though. I mean, like, I get that he's famous, but I don't see me as a Billy Bob Thornton type. The Rock? Can I be The Rock?
There you go. Okay. I like it.
Dwayne Johnson running around auditing royalties.
There we go.
I don't know if he's going to go for that script.
We'll put in a few calls for you.
Done.
We really appreciate it, Sam. This has been fantastic, and this is one of those fun episodes where we get to kind of branch out from our past of Jairus and my past, learn something new. I hope you guys listening and watching at home have learned something new too. Get a hold of Sam if you'd like to connect and find out more. And this has been the Real Deal Landman Show. That's Jairus. I'm Drew. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.